conclude the question, so we've looked at the individual from various perspectives. What do you think the role of the individual is now that we're living in a world with different groups and different conditions? How would you see the role of the individual in society in the future? Are you optimistic about it?
Yes, fundamentally. And the reason I'm optimistic is partly because I'm very deeply pessimistic by nature. And I've looked at a very large number of terrible things, both in my studies and in my personal life and in my private practice. And my conclusion has been that despite the vast ocean of ignorance that we all swim in and the overwhelming proclivity for malevolence that characterizes the human psyche, that the nobility that's part and parcel of us and the potential can transcend that and defeat it. And so it's very dark, but there's something very bright at the bottom. And so I'm very optimistic about that, and that's part of the reason that that I wrote the book that I wrote, but also that I'm touring around the world, talking to people about adopting something approximating a vision that's noble and worthy, and setting their speech straight and getting their lives together and shouldering the responsibility of the world in a manner that's good for them and their family and their communities, and to think about that as an aspirational goal that provides them with the meaning to offset the tragedy of their life. And I believe that's solid, right to the core. And my impression is that it's that knowing that, hearing that, which is something that all people already know in some sense, but hearing that articulated clearly is of great utility to people. And every time someone comes up to me, and this happens very often, multiple times a day, no matter where I am, and someone comes up to me and says, excuse me, are you Dr. Peterson? And they usually say that very politely, and they're apologetic for disturbing me, even though they're not disturbing me. They say, look, I was having a rough time a couple of years ago, addicted, alcoholic, lonesome, disturbed in my personal relationships. I've been watching your lectures, listening to your books, listening to your podcasts. Things are much better. Thank you. It's like every time that happens, it's overwhelming. I'm sorry, it always breaks me up, but it's very overwhelming. You see, it's very overwhelming to have strangers come up and tell you things that they won't tell people that are close to them. You know, it indicates that they trust, that there's a trust there, that's a deep trust, because the people who are doing this, they come up and tell me that because they're very pleased about it, but also because they know that I'll be pleased about it. And I am overwhelmingly pleased about it. And so, and for me, every time I hear something like that, that's a victory. You know, I studied the structure of totalitarianism for a very long time and became a very firm believer in the idea of good and evil. And I do believe that the most appropriate way to conceptualize the nature of human experience is as a battle between good and evil. And I think it's a very serious battle because the evil is very dark and very terrible. And every time I see someone who has reoriented themselves in an upward direction, then I regard that as part of what defeats that terrible malevolence and bitterness. And I believe that the fundamental doctrine that each individual is a center of creation, I believe that to be literally and metaphorically true. And I also believe that each of us participate in the process of transforming what could be into what is, and that we do that as a consequence of our ethical choices, and that we shape the world as a consequence of that. And so then when I hear someone come up to me and say, look, you know, I've done everything I could in the last while to put myself together, and it's much less dark around me, I think. That's one more major victory on the bitter road uphill. So
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.